The warm summer sun painted golden streaks across the vast American landscape that day. Gabby Petito stood beside her white Ford Transit van, her blonde hair catching the light. The 22-year-old aspiring content creator breathed in the mountain air with childlike wonder and excitement. This cross-country journey had been her dream for so long, a chance to document beautiful places. She adjusted her camera with practiced hands, while Brian Laundrie, her fiancé and travel companion. They had converted the van into their temporary home, outfitted with all essentials needed. Their relationship had blossomed in high school in Long Island, New York, where they both grew. Two young souls who found comfort in each other's presence and shared a mutual wanderlust. Gabby's infectious smile and bubbly personality attracted people, naturally making her the perfect influencer candidate. Brian, more reserved and quiet by nature, preferred staying behind the scenes, helping with logistics. Their Instagram page Nomadic Static was growing, slowly, showcasing their adventures across the country. The plan seemed perfect: travel across America, visiting national parks and landmarks while documenting everything. They would build their social media following, creating content that might eventually provide income. Gabby quit her job at a smoothie shop to pursue this dream with unwavering determination. The van life community embraced them warmly, offering tips and encouragement for their journey ahead. July 2021 marked the beginning of their great adventure, full of hopes and exciting possibilities. Moab, Utah, with its striking red rock formations, provided a dramatic backdrop for their videos. Gabby's face glowed with genuine enthusiasm as she described the hiking trails and stunning vistas. Her parents back in New York followed their journey through frequent texts and occasional FaceTime calls. They noticed how their daughter seemed to bloom in this nomadic lifestyle she had chosen for. The freedom of the open road suited her free-spirited nature perfectly, unleashing creativity they always knew. Behind the carefully curated social media posts, however, lay a more complicated reality than followers could see. The confined space of the van created tensions, sometimes evident in the background of their videos. Living together 24/7 in such limited quarters tested their relationship in ways they hadn't anticipated before. The stress of constant travel, uncertain finances, and maintaining an online presence added unexpected pressure to what had once been a carefree romance now faced the harsh realities of adult responsibilities daily. Gabby's phone calls home became less frequent as August progressed, her messages increasingly brief and scattered. Her mother, Nicole Schmidt, sensed something wasn't quite right but attributed it to poor reception areas. The last video uploaded to their YouTube channel showed Gabby arranging flowers in the van while smiling at the camera, seemingly happy and content with the life she had chosen for herself. Those who knew her well might have noticed a slight dimming in her usually radiant eyes. The Grand Teton stood majestically in the background of their last known location in late August. Gabby told her family she and Brian were heading to Yellowstone next, their excitement seemingly undiminished. A park ranger who briefly spoke with the couple noted how animated Gabby became when discussing their travel plans for the coming weeks ahead, her enthusiasm for nature's wonders never waning throughout. What no one could have predicted was that this journey, documented so lovingly online, would soon capture the nation's attention for entirely different reasons, becoming a tragic mystery instead of an adventure. The picturesque landscapes they visited would transform into search areas, their love story scrutinized by millions. The white van that represented freedom would become a key piece of evidence in what followed. The last text message from Gabby's phone to her mother on August 30th simply stated that there was no service in Yosemite, though investigators would later question whether she actually sent it. Brian's parents in Northport, Florida received calls from him indicating he was returning home early. Without explanation, he arrived at his parents' house on September 1st, driving the white van alone. 10 days passed before Gabby's family, unable to reach her, reported her missing to Suffolk County Police, creating a timeline that would soon grip the public's attention and spark nationwide concern for the young woman with dreams bigger than her small hometown, whose bright smile had vanished from view. Her story began spreading across social media platforms, the very medium she had hoped would showcase her adventures instead became the catalyst for searching, her face appearing on news stations nationwide daily. The contrast between her joyful travel posts and the grim reality of her disappearance created an unsettling narrative that captivated America's attention, drawing strangers into the mystery of what had happened to the girl who had set out to document beautiful places across the country's vast landscape eagerly. As the search intensified across Wyoming's wilderness areas, those who followed Gabby's journey online began reviewing her posts more carefully, looking for any clues that might have been missed previously by viewers. Amateur detectives combed through hours of footage and hundreds of photographs, seeking answers to the troubling question of where the vibrant young woman had gone and why she had suddenly stopped communicating. As the investigation into Gabby's disappearance intensified, several key figures emerged who would become instrumental in the unfolding story that captivated the nation's attention, creating a complex web of relationships and tensions. Detective Martinez from the Northport Police Department led the initial investigation with methodical precision and dedication, his 20 years of experience evident in his careful questioning and thorough examination of evidence. His calm demeanor masked a growing frustration with the Laundrie family's reluctance to fully cooperate with Rose Davis, Gabby's best friend from Florida, stepped into the public spotlight with heartbreaking testimonies about their friendship and her concerns about Brian's behavior, revealing aspects of their relationship previously hidden from the carefully curated social media presence the couple had maintained throughout their journey across the country together. Brian had these episodes, Rose explained to investigators, her voice trembling with emotion and barely contained anger, where he would hear things and see things that weren't there, especially when we went. Brian's parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, remained largely secluded in their Northport home, blinds drawn against the growing media presence outside their residence, their silence creating a stark contrast to the Schmidt and Petito families' desperate pleas for information about their daughter's whereabouts and what might have happened during those final days in Wyoming's wilderness, areas where the couple had last been seen. Joseph Petito, Gabby's father, emerged as a powerful voice in the search, his determination cutting through the bureaucratic red tape that initially slowed progress, organizing search parties and pressing authorities to expand their efforts across multiple states and jurisdictions simultaneously, his love for his daughter evident in every interview he gave to increasingly interested national media outlets that had begun covering the case extensively. Nicole Schmidt, Gabby's mother, maintained a more reserved but equally determined presence, carefully documenting every communication she had with her daughter before her disappearance, working alongside digital forensics experts to analyze text messages that seemed increasingly out of character as August progressed, her maternal instincts telling her something was deeply wrong even before the official investigation began, in earnest after the missing persons report was. The first significant breakthrough came when travel blogger Jen Bethune reviewed footage she had captured while driving through Grand Teton National Park on August 27th, spotting what appeared to be Gabby and Brian's distinctive white van parked along a remote road near Spread Creek dispersed camping area where rangers had previously noted seeing the young couple camping during the last week of August quietly. Meanwhile, tensions between Brian and Gabby had been building throughout their journey, documented in an incident report filed by Moab police officers who responded to a domestic disturbance call on August 12th. Officer Luke Crawford's body cam footage showed a distraught Gabby explaining through tears how their arguments had escalated that morning, her small frame shaking visibly as she described slapping Brian during an intense disagreement about her social media content and schedule, revealing cracks in their seemingly perfect relationship publicly. Officer Melissa Thompson, who separately interviewed Brian, noted his calm demeanor and lack of visible distress, despite scratches on his face and arms that he attributed to Gabby's anxiety attack earlier that day, creating a contradictory narrative that puzzled the officers enough to separate the couple for one night as a precautionary measure before allowing them to continue their journey westward the following morning. Miranda Baker, a TikTok user who had given Brian a ride on August 29th, came forward with crucial information about his demeanor and strange behavior during their brief encounter near the Spread Creek area, noting how he offered her $200 for a 20-mile ride before abruptly asking to be let out when she mentioned heading to Jackson Hole, his nervous energy and contradictory statements raising the mysterious final text message from Gabby's phone stating no service in Yosemite created significant confusion among investigators since it contradicted their known location in Wyoming, thousands of miles away from California. Digital forensics specialist Dr. Eleanor Chen was brought in to analyze the message patterns and determine whether Gabby had actually sent it or if someone else had used her phone after her. Cassie, Laundrie, Brian's sister, became the only family member to speak publicly, creating further complications when her statements about when she last saw her brother contradicted information the Laundrie attorney had provided to authorities investigating the case with increasing urgency as public pressure mounted for answers about Gabby's. Meanwhile, a parallel story was unfolding as witnesses reported seeing the couple at Mary Piglet's Tex-Mex restaurant in Jackson Hole on August 27th, describing an angry confrontation where Brian argued aggressively with staff while Gabby apologized repeatedly for his behavior, returning multiple times to the establishment to make amends for his outburst that had disturbed other diners and concerned the restaurant manager enough. Park Ranger Melissa Holes, who had spoken with Gabby during the Moab incident, later expressed profound regret for not doing more, having recognized what she described as classic signs of an abusive relationship during their brief but significant conversation near the police vehicles that summer afternoon in Utah. As the search intensified across Wyoming's vast wilderness areas, online communities formed to share information and coordinate volunteer efforts, with TikTok user Paris Campbell emerging as an influential voice who helped organize digital sleuths combing through satellite imagery and tourists' photographs that might contain clues about the couples. FBI agent Sarah Robertson took lead of the federal investigation, working alongside local authorities to coordinate the increasingly complex case that now spanned multiple states and jurisdictions, her methodical approach bringing structure to what had become a media sensation and national obsession, prioritizing forensic evidence over speculation that had begun dominating social media discussions about the case and its increasingly troubling implications for all. Throughout these developments, Brian remained at his parents' home in Florida, refusing to speak with authorities or Gabby's increasingly desperate family members seeking answers, his silence creating a vacuum that speculation quickly filled, transforming the once idyllic van life journey into a dark mystery that gripped the nation's collective imagination and raised difficult questions about relationship dynamics, social media perception versus reality, and the vulnerabilities. The search for Gabby Petito intensified dramatically when FBI agents descended upon the Spread Creek campground, with search dogs and forensic teams combing the area methodically, their grim expressions betraying the growing concern that this case might not have the outcome everyone desperately hoped for despite public optimism. Special Agent Robertson established a mobile command center, coordinating dozens of personnel across the vast wilderness, where cell service remained spotty at best, hampering communication efforts between search teams and headquarters regularly. Meanwhile in Florida, the tension surrounding the Laundrie residents reached a fever pitch as protesters gathered outside with megaphones and signs demanding answers from the family who remained sequestered behind closed doors. Local police maintained a constant presence to prevent any potential confrontations between increasingly vocal demonstrators and the neighbors who found themselves unwittingly caught in a national drama playing out on their quiet suburban street, their lives disrupted by the constant media presence and curious onlookers arriving daily from. Detective Martinez discovered a troubling pattern when reviewing the couple's financial records, noting that Brian had used Gabby's debit card multiple times after his return to Florida, withdrawing over $1,000 from her account between August 30th and September 1st, transactions that occurred when her whereabouts remained unknown and her phone had gone silent, creating a timeline that raised serious questions about his actions during those critical days after their last confirmed sighting together at the Mary Piglet's restaurant. Rose Davis revealed to investigators that Gabby had begun using a coded system in their conversations to indicate when tensions with Brian escalated dangerously, sharing screenshots of text messages where certain phrases appeared that the two friends had previously established as warning signals about Brian's mental state and behavior, information that painted an increasingly concerning picture of the relationship dynamics hidden behind their curated social media presence that had portrayed an idyllic adventure rather than a journey marked by conflict. The weather in Wyoming took a devastating turn as an early September storm system moved through the search area, washing away potential evidence and complicating efforts to locate any signs of Gabby's presence in the remote camping locations where they had last been seen by witnesses and fellow travelers who continued coming forward with sightings and brief encounters with the couple during late August. Park Ranger Wilson, who had patrolled the area regularly throughout the summer, reported increasingly erratic weather patterns making search conditions treacherous for the teams scouring the rugged terrain on foot and horseback. Joseph Petito's frustration boiled over during a press conference when he directly addressed Brian's family, saying, "If you genuinely cared about my daughter as you've claimed to, then help us find her." His voice cracking with emotion as Nicole Schmidt, stood beside him clutching their daughter's favorite teddy bear that she'd brought to every press appearance as a talisman of hope and reminder of what was at stake in this increasingly desperate search for their beloved daughter across multiple states. A significant breakthrough came when a hiker reported finding an abandoned fire ring near a remote creek bed containing torn pages from what appeared to be a journal, the handwriting matching samples of Gabby's that her parents had provided to investigators early in the case. The discovered pages, containing troubling references to arguments and incidents that had occurred during their final weeks traveling together. The partial journal entries described feelings of isolation, fear, and confusion about her relationship and future. The digital forensics team made a startling discovery when analyzing the metadata from Gabby's final Instagram posts, determining that several had been scheduled in advance using a third-party application with captions that appeared to have been written by someone attempting to mimic her distinctive writing style, but containing subtle linguistic differences that Dr. Chen identified as potentially coming from another author entirely, raising questions about who had been controlling her social media presence during those final days in August. Officer Thompson was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into the handling of the Moab incident after body cam footage was released publicly, sparking outrage among domestic violence advocates who criticized the department's decision to separate the couple temporarily, rather than recognizing what they described as clear warning signs of a potentially abusive relationship dynamic that required more significant intervention before allowing them to continue their journey together through increasingly remote areas of the country away from support systems. Brian's sister Cassie broke ranks with her family, agreeing to speak with protesters outside her home, where she admitted she hadn't been entirely truthful about when she last saw her brother before his disappearance, revealing he had visited her family, camping at Fort De Soto Park after returning to Florida without Gabby, a crucial detail that contradicted previous statements and established his movements during a period when investigators had limited information about his activities and mental state following his return. The Laundrie family attorney Stephen Bertolino found himself increasingly isolated as he attempted to navigate the complex legal and public relations nightmare unfolding around his clients, his brief statements to media only further inflaming public opinion against the family, who continued refusing to speak directly with the Petito family or fully cooperate with investigators seeking information about Gabby's final days with their son before his return to Florida alone in her van, a silence that many interpreted as calculated and suspicious. A park employee cleaning restrooms near Spread Creek discovered a small silver bracelet engraved with GP and BL wedged behind a toilet paper dispenser, the item matching one visible in several Instagram photos of the couple during their journey across the country together, its discovery triggering an intensive search of the surrounding facilities and campground areas where the couple had reportedly stayed during late August, according to campsite registration records and witness accounts from other travelers who recalled seeing the revelation that Brian had disappeared from his parents' home despite being under police surveillance created a stunning new dimension to the already complex case, with Christopher and Roberta Laundrie claiming their son had gone hiking in the vast Carlton Reserve Wilderness area days earlier and never returned. The timing of his disappearance, just as authorities narrowed their search in Wyoming and media pressure intensified, struck investigators as highly suspicious and potentially indicative of someone fleeing rather than simply missing. Northport Police Chief Thomas Garrison faced increasing criticism for his department's failure to maintain proper surveillance of Brian despite considering him a person of interest in Gabby's disappearance. His press conference is becoming increasingly tense as reporters questioned how a key figure in the investigation could simply vanish while supposedly under observation, forcing him to acknowledge significant errors in their handling of the case that had potentially allowed a crucial witness or suspect to escape accountability at a critical. The search for Gabby reached a critical point when drone footage captured images of what appeared to be a tent site near a remote stream bed that matched descriptions of the couple's preferred camping setup based on their social media posts, triggering an immediate convergence of search resources on the area as daylight faded over the Wyoming mountains, the teams working against time and deteriorating weather conditions to reach the location before nightfall, their determination evident in the urgent radio communications between search coordinators and field teams navigating the difficult terrain with specialized equipment and canine units. The nation held its collective breath as news helicopters circled the search area, broadcasting live footage of FBI agents and local authorities establishing a perimeter around an area now hidden from media view by hastily erected privacy screens, the sudden increase in activity indicating something significant had been discovered as additional forensic specialists were airlifted to the remote location while official vehicles formed a procession along the narrow access road leading to the site where searchers had concentrated their efforts. Meanwhile, both families waited in agonizing silence for news that would forever change the trajectory of the somber press conference held by FBI Special Agent Robertson confirmed the nation's worst fears that Sunday. We are deeply saddened to share that earlier today, human remains consistent with the description of Gabby Petito were discovered in the Spread Creek, dispersed camping area within Grand Teton National Park. The words hung heavily in the air as reporters fell silent, the weight of the announcement palpable even through television screens across America where millions had become invested in finding the missing. Joseph Petito stood frozen beside Nicole Schmidt, their hands clasped tightly together as they absorbed the devastating news they had feared but desperately hoped to avoid hearing, their faces reflecting the emotional tsunami washing over them as Agent Robertson continued, describing how the identification was preliminary pending forensic confirmation, though investigators felt confident enough to notify the family before making the public announcement that would forever change their lives and the trajectory of what had begun as a missing person case. While the nation processed this heartbreaking development, the search for Brian Laundrie intensified across the vast 25,000-acre Carlton Reserve, a treacherous wilderness filled with alligators, poisonous snakes, and challenging terrain that complicated search efforts despite the deployment of specialized teams with infrared technology, drones, and cadaver dogs. Scanning the area where his parents insisted he had gone hiking days earlier before disappearing from their watchful eyes, a claim that investigators increasingly questioned as the timeline of events became clearer through witness. Tara Knight, a criminal defense attorney who had been following the case closely, explained to news cameras outside the Laundrie home the difficult position his parents now faced as public sentiment turned against them. They're caught between protecting their son and potentially obstructing justice if they're concealing information about what happened in Wyoming, placing them in legal jeopardy regardless of what choice they make. The dilemma highlighted the impossible situation the family found themselves in, their silence interpreted as complicity. The Teton County medical examiner faced the daunting task of determining Gabby's cause of death under intense public scrutiny, working methodically despite pressure for quick answers from a nation demanding justice for the young woman whose life had been cut short in such tragic circumstances. His team operating behind closed doors with FBI forensic specialists documenting every detail that might help reconstruct her final moments and establish a timeline for what had occurred at the remote campsite where her remains. Detective Martinez made a critical discovery when reviewing footage from a gas station security camera near Jackson Hole, capturing Brian alone in Gabby's van, appearing agitated while purchasing several large containers of cleaning supplies on August 28th, his behavior notably different from previous footage where the couple had stopped together during their journey. This new evidence suggesting a significant change in circumstances that aligned with the last verified sighting of Gabby alive, creating a damning timeline that prosecutors began assembling. Rose Davis faced her own painful dilemma when FBI agents asked her to review the final text messages she'd received from Gabby's phone, determining whether they genuinely reflected her friend's communication style or possibly came from someone else using her device, the responsibility weighing heavily as she recognized her insights could be crucial to establishing what happened during those final days of August when Gabby's digital presence became increasingly sporadic and eventually ceased entirely after what investigators now believed was her. The discovery of Brian's abandoned Ford Mustang at the Carlton Reserve entrance created another pivotal moment in the investigation, with forensic teams processing the vehicle for evidence while search teams expanded their efforts based on this confirmation of his last known location, the abandoned car, creating questions about whether he had actually entered the vast wilderness, or if this was a calculated misdirection designed to buy time as he fled elsewhere, theories that investigators pursued simultaneously while resources stretched increasingly thin. Christopher and Roberta Laundrie faced an excruciating decision when FBI agents presented them with phone records showing their son had called them multiple times on August 29th during what investigators now believed was the critical period immediately following Gabby's death, the parents now forced to choose between protecting their son or cooperating fully with authorities seeking answers about what he might have revealed during those conversations that could establish his knowledge of or involvement in the tragic events in Wyoming. Social media exploded with activity when a trucking company released dashcam footage showing a man resembling Brian hitchhiking along Highway 191 near the Jackson Lake area on August 29th, appearing disheveled and anxious as he attempted to flag down passing vehicles heading south toward Jackson Hole. This sighting occurring in the opposite direction from where the van had been spotted near Spread Creek, suggesting he had separated from the vehicle temporarily before returning to it based on the timeline investigators. The preliminary autopsy findings delivered to the Petito family created perhaps the most gut-wrenching moment yet. Dr. Harrison, the medical examiner, gently explained to Joseph and Nicole that their daughter's death had been classified as a homicide, though specific details about the manner would remain confidential during the active investigation. This confirmation transforming Brian from a person of interest to a suspect wanted for questioning in connection with her death, escalating the urgent manhunt across multiple states as federal charges. Agent Robertson faced intense criticism when announcing that the FBI had been aware of domestic incident. Reports involving the couple weeks before Gabby was reported missing without connecting them to potential danger. When her family first expressed concerns about her silence, this administrative failing creating questions about whether earlier intervention might have prevented the tragedy if warning signs had been properly flagged and followed up on by authorities who had direct contact with the couple during their documented dispute in Utah. The Laundrie family lawyer arranged a conference call with FBI negotiators seeking to establish communication with Brian if he was still alive, his parents agreeing to record a plea for him to turn himself in safely, their voices breaking with emotion as they faced cameras, knowing their words might reach their son who had vanished under suspicious circumstances, leaving them to navigate the devastating aftermath of his relationship with Gabby and her tragic death that had forever linked their families. As a nationwide manhunt intensified, digital forensics experts made a breakthrough when analyzing data from Brian's phone, revealing it had pinged towers near the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina, hundreds of miles from where search efforts had concentrated in Florida, this development forcing investigators to split resources between multiple potential locations while attempting to verify the authenticity of numerous reported sightings, flooding tip lines across the country from people believing they had encountered him despite his face being plastered across. Gabby's memorial service became a national moment of collective grief as thousands of strangers joined family members to honor her life and legacy, the small Long Island community overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from across America and beyond, with flowers, butterflies, and tributes reflecting how deeply her story had touched people who never knew her personally but felt connected through the tragic circumstances of her death and the questions that remained unanswered about her final days in Wyoming's wilderness. The creation of the Gabby Petito Foundation represented a pivotal moment for her parents, who channeled their immeasurable grief into establishing resources for families of missing persons and victims of domestic violence. "We can't bring our daughter back," Joseph said, through tears at the announcement, "but we can help prevent this happening to someone else's child," his determination to create meaning from tragedy becoming a rallying point for advocates seeking systemic changes in how domestic violence cases and missing persons. Law enforcement officials gathered for an emergency strategy session when surveillance footage from a convenience store in eastern Tennessee captured images of someone bearing strong resemblance to Brian purchasing supplies with cash. The timestamp showing the transaction occurred after he had been reported missing from Florida, this potential sighting creating renewed urgency in the manhunt as authorities recognized the expanding geographic scope required to locate him if he was actively evading capture, moving between locations while monitoring media coverage. The revelation that Brian Laundrie had been keeping a secret notebook discovered by investigators searching the Carlton Reserve sent shockwaves through both families and the nation, watching the case unfold with morbid fascination, its water-damaged pages potentially holding answers to questions that had consumed public attention for weeks. FBI document specialists worked meticulously to preserve and decipher the partially legible writings found alongside personal effects in a dry bag near a remote trail where repeated searches had previously yielded nothing. Teton County Coroner Dr. Benjamin Whitmore faced the cameras with grim determination, delivering the official findings from Gabby's autopsy that confirmed manual strangulation as the cause of death, the technical details mercifully omitted from the public announcement out of respect for her family who had requested privacy during this most painful revelation about their daughter's final moments, the confirmation transforming public speculation into horrific reality as the implications of such an intimate form of violence resonated through news coverage nationwide. Agent Robertson coordinated the largest domestic manhunt since the Boston Marathon bombing, resources from multiple federal agencies deployed across strategic locations where credible sightings had been reported or digital evidence suggested Brian might be attempting to evade capture while surviving off the grid using wilderness skills he had developed and frequently showcased on social media during his travels with Gabby. These same platforms now being scrutinized for clues about locations he might seek refuge in based on past expressed interests. The Petito family attorney announced a wrongful death lawsuit against the Laundrie family, claiming they had knowledge of their son's actions and helped conceal information that could have provided closure sooner. This legal action creating another layer of complexity in the intertwined tragedy connecting these two families forever. "This isn't about money," Joseph Petito stated firmly during the announcement. "This is about accountability and ensuring the truth comes to light regardless of who it implicates or what painful revelations might." Rose Davis appeared on a national morning show, sharing previously unknown details about the couple's relationship. Gabby confided that she was planning to end things after their trip, she revealed through tears. She felt trapped but thought completing their journey would provide closure before she moved on with her life. This revelation casting the final weeks of their relationship in heartbreaking new light and suggesting possible motives for escalating tensions documented in witness accounts from their final days together traveling. A major breakthrough occurred when hikers discovered remnants of a campsite in North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest containing items matching Brian's description, including distinctive clothing and food packaging consistent with his known preferences, triggering an immediate surge of resources to the area located near the Appalachian Trail where multiple witnesses had reported encounters with someone resembling him in the weeks following his disappearance from Florida. These sightings initially dismissed as unlikely given the distance but now appearing increasingly plausible as Christopher and Roberta Laundrie made the painful decision to assist search efforts in the Carlton Reserve. After weeks of public criticism for their perceived lack of cooperation, joining law enforcement personnel in areas where they recalled their son frequently hiking, their unexpected participation raising questions about whether they had received new information about his whereabouts or condition that prompted their sudden change in approach. The images of Brian's parents wading through waist-deep water alongside officers who had previously viewed them. Gabby's mother launched a domestic violence awareness initiative, partnering with national organizations to help identify warning signs and provide resources for those in potentially dangerous relationships. Her personal tragedy transformed into advocacy. If sharing our story prevents one person from experiencing what Gabby endured, then some meaning comes from our unbearable loss, she explained during the emotional announcement that received widespread support from celebrities and public figures who had been following the case and felt compelled to contribute to meaningful. FBI analysts processing the data from Brian's recovered phone and computer uncovered a series of deleted text messages between him and Gabby from the days immediately preceding her death, these communications revealing escalating arguments about their relationship's future and plans for returning home, with mentions of separation that added crucial context to understanding their final interactions before tragedy struck in the remote Wyoming wilderness. The digital evidence painted a picture of deteriorating mental states and increasing desperation on both sides. The weather turned against search efforts as hurricane season brought torrential rains to Florida, flooding significant portions of the Carlton Reserve and rendering numerous areas temporarily inaccessible to ground teams, while simultaneously complicating searches along the Appalachian Trail where autumn storms created dangerous conditions for personnel combing the vast wilderness for any signs of Brian's presence or passage through remote areas where he might find temporary shelter from elements and evade detection by authorities closing in from multiple directions simultaneously. A stunning development occurred when surveillance footage from a remote gas station outside of Atlanta captured clear images of someone matching Brian's description purchasing supplies with cash while wearing a distinctive hat and face mask in an apparent attempt to conceal his identity, the timestamp indicating this occurred nearly 2 weeks after his disappearance from Florida, suggesting his movements covered far greater distance than investigators initially believed possible, forcing a recalibration of search parameters and resources across a widening geographic area spanning. The Petito family visited the memorial site established near where Gabby's remains were discovered in Wyoming. The emotional pilgrimage documented by close friends accompanying them as they sought closure and connection with the place their daughter had spent her final days, surrounded by the natural beauty she had traveled to experience and share with her followers online, this journey representing a crucial step in their grieving process while search efforts continued for the man who authorities now officially named as responsible. Local law enforcement in multiple states found themselves overwhelmed by the volume of reported sightings flooding emergency lines, each requiring verification and follow-up despite limited resources, many proving to be cases of mistaken identity or deliberate false reports from attention seekers, inserting themselves into the high-profile case that continued dominating headlines and social media discussions across America, the challenge of separating credible leads from noise, creating constant difficulty for investigators attempting to narrow their focus on areas most likely to yield the discovery of a backpack containing Brian's identification alongside human remains in a previously flooded section of the Carlton Reserve marked a potential turning point in the manhunt that had captivated national attention. For weeks, the area having been underwater during previous search efforts before receding water levels revealed what may have been hidden beneath murky waters all along, dental records being rushed for comparison to determine whether the extensive search had finally concluded with the discovery of the fugitive who had. Dr. Martin Fisher, forensic anthropologist called to examine the remains found in the reserve, faced the challenging task of determining cause and approximate time of death given the environmental exposure and animal activity in the area, his findings potentially resolving questions about whether Brian had been deceased during the entire manhunt or had survived for some period while evading capture across state lines. This determination crucial for closing multiple aspects of the investigation that had grown increasingly complex with each. The notebook recovered near the remains became the focus of intense interest as forensic document specialists worked to recover legible portions of what appeared to be final thoughts, potentially including admissions or explanations about what had transpired between him and Gabby during their final days together in Wyoming. The partially preserved pages offered what might be the only opportunity to understand his perspective on events that had led to tragedy and a nationwide manhunt, the contents protected as evidence while as official identification of the remains proceeded, both families waited in agonizing suspense for confirmation that would potentially end one chapter of the tragic story while opening new questions about what justice might look like when the primary suspect was no longer alive to face legal consequences for actions that had destroyed multiple lives and captivated public attention in unprecedented ways, raising difficult discussions about domestic violence, social media perception versus reality, and the sometimes dangerous pursuit of idealized lifestyles. The Gabby Petito Foundation received thousands of donations from across the world, resources that would fund missing person searches for individuals whose cases lacked the national attention that Gabby's had generated, addressing what social commentators had termed missing white woman syndrome by extending support to families of color whose missing loved ones received fraction of media coverage or investigative resources despite equally devastating personal impacts. This effort to create meaningful legacy from tragedy representing one positive outcome from the heartbreaking winter descended upon the Grand Teton Mountains, blankets of pristine snow covering the landscape where Gabby had spent her final days, the passage of time transforming the once frenzied search area into a peaceful memorial site visited by those who felt connected to her story despite never knowing her. In Florida, the official identification of remains found in Carlton Reserve as belonging to Brian Laundrie brought a somber conclusion to the manhunt that had captivated the nation for over a month. The dental records confirmation and subsequent autopsy revealed that Brian had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, likely occurring shortly after his disappearance into the vast wilderness area, the weapon recovered nearby. His parents, who had pointed investigators toward this specific area after restrictions were lifted, now faced their own grief alongside public scrutiny that would likely follow them for years to come. Their silence during crucial weeks of the investigation continuing to raise questions about what they knew, and FBI agent Robertson stood before journalists at the final press conference, the weight of the case evident in her measured words and exhausted expression. Today, we are officially closing the investigation into the death of Gabrielle Petito, having reviewed all evidence and determined that Brian Laundrie was the only individual responsible for her tragic death in Wyoming. The conclusion, while expected, still sent ripples through the gathered crowd of reporters and onlookers who had followed every development with unwavering attention. The notebook recovered near Brian's remains provided partial answers that investigators shared with both families before releasing selected contents to the public. His water-damaged confessions confirming what physical evidence had already suggested. "I ended her life, I ended mine," he had written in shaky handwriting across pages stained by exposure to elements. "A moment of rage I can never take back will haunt me forever." The sparse admission offered little explanation for the complex emotions and circumstances leading to violence that Joseph Petito and Nicole Schmidt established a permanent foundation in their daughter's name, channeling their immeasurable grief into purpose as they advocated for domestic violence awareness and support for families of missing persons regardless of background or circumstances. Their commitment to creating meaningful change from personal tragedy inspiring similar initiatives across the country and communities touched by Gabby's story and the broader issues it illuminated about relationship violence, often hidden behind carefully curated social media presentations of perfect lives and 1 year after Gabby's memorial service, the Moab Police Department implemented comprehensive new training protocols for officers responding to domestic disturbance calls, directly addressing failures identified in their handling of the couple's interaction. Weeks before the tragedy, these changes named Gabby's protocol in recognition of how different outcomes might have been possible with proper intervention during warning signs that had been documented but not adequately addressed by authorities who encountered the couple during their journey through Utah that summer day. The quiet suburb of Northport, Florida gradually returned to normalcy as media attention finally faded from the Laundrie neighborhood where protesters had once gathered daily. The modest home eventually sold to new owners unconnected to the case after Christopher and Roberta relocated to escape persistent public attention. Their attorney maintained they had no knowledge of Brian's actions until it was too late, claimed many would continue to question as civil litigation between the families proceeded through courts for. In a gesture that surprised many, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie contributed anonymously to the Gabby Petito Foundation, the substantial donation discovered only when financial records were reviewed by the organization's accountants. "We can never repair what was broken," their accompanying note read, "but perhaps help prevent similar tragedies for others," the tentative olive branch representing the beginning of what might eventually become healing between families forever connected through circumstances neither would have chosen, their shared grief following different paths. Rose Davis published a memoir titled Remembering Gabby, capturing the authentic spirit of her friend beyond the headlines and social media posts that had defined her in public consciousness, sharing stories of their friendship and Gabby's dreams beyond the van life journey that had ended so tragically in Wyoming. She was so much more than her final chapter, Rose wrote in the introduction, a creative soul with boundless compassion who saw beauty everywhere she looked, the book becoming a heartfelt tribute rather. The documentary series examining the case became the most watched investigation special of the year, exploring not only the tragic events themselves but broader social issues including domestic violence, disparities in media coverage of missing persons cases, and the double-edged sword of social media that both helped locate Gabby and obscured the reality of her relationship dynamics until it was too late. The production winning awards for its sensitive handling of complex themes while avoiding exploitation of personal tragedy for. On what would have been Gabby's 24th birthday, a butterfly garden was dedicated at a Long Island park near her childhood home, the peaceful sanctuary, filled with her favorite flowers and native plants, designed to attract the monarch butterflies she had always loved watching during summer afternoons spent there, with friends and family who now gathered annually to remember her life rather than dwelling on its tragic end, finding solace in shared memories and the vibrant community of support that had emerged from the darkest circumstances imaginable for any. Dr. Eleanor Chin published a groundbreaking study on digital forensics in missing persons cases, using lessons from Gabby's investigation to develop new protocols for analyzing social media patterns and communication changes that might indicate distress or danger, her work creating valuable tools for law enforcement agencies nationwide seeking to identify warning signs earlier in similar situations, potentially saving lives through more timely interventions when digital footprints show subtle shifts that trained analysts can now recognize thanks to patterns identified through the van that had symbolized freedom and adventure for Gabby was eventually donated to a women's shelter organization, refurbished and repurposed to transport survivors of domestic violence to safe housing in court. Appearances, its exterior painted with butterflies and messages of hope, transforming a vehicle once associated with tragedy into a symbol of escape and new beginnings for women finding courage to leave dangerous situations, the practical resource providing tangible help while honoring Gabby's memory in meaningful ways. Her family. 5 years after the case that captured America's attention, Joseph Petito stood beside park ranger Melissa Holes at the dedication of a new visitor safety center at Grand Teton National Park, the facility designed to provide resources for travelers in distress and educational materials about recognizing relationship danger. Today we turn this place of heartbreak into one of hope, he said, his voice steady with the resilience that had carried him through unimaginable loss and poured purpose that helped countless others. In perhaps the most unexpected development, a USB drive was discovered during renovations of the Laundrie home by new owners, hidden in a heating vent and containing video footage never seen during the investigation, showing Gabby addressing the camera directly just days before her death, her eyes reflecting awareness of danger as she whispered instructions about where to find her journal if anything happened. "If you're watching this, I probably didn't make it home," she said with remarkable composure. Brian's. The recovered footage revealed Gabby had been secretly documenting instances of controlling behavior and emotional abuse throughout their journey, creating a video diary intended to protect herself should circumstances deteriorate further as she increasingly feared they might, this final piece of the puzzle confirming she had recognized warning signs and attempted to create safety measures while planning her exit strategy from the relationship. Her awareness and foresight tragically insufficient against the escalating danger she faced in isolation, far from support. The national conversation sparked by Gabby's story ultimately created measurable change in how domestic violence cases are handled by law enforcement, with specialized training programs implemented across multiple states based on lessons learned from missed opportunities in her case. These systemic improvements representing the most meaningful legacy of a life cut tragically short, but whose impact continued rippling outward through lives saved by new protocols and awareness that might otherwise never have developed without the spotlight her story placed on. As autumn leaves fell across the Memorial Butterfly Garden on Long Island, Nicole Schmidt placed fresh flowers beside her daughter's smiling photograph, the seasons continuing their eternal cycle as memories remained unchanged. The mother who had channeled unimaginable grief into purpose now counseled other families navigating similar losses. "Gabby would be proud of what we've built from this tragedy," she whispered, watching a Monarch butterfly land briefly on the memorial plaque before taking flight again, its delicate wings carrying it skyward toward an endless horizon of possibilities that somehow felt like the perfect metaphor for a